Hello and welcome back to American Cinema, Lecture 5. Now we're getting into the late 60s, and what a tumultuous time for America and also Hollywood. Lots of changes going on. So we saw the promise of the early 60s with the Kennedy election. Well, that comes crashing down when he's assassinated in 63, along with civil rights leaders, and then later on Bobby Kennedy in 68. So there's a lot of turmoil and dissent, assassinations, protests, and a huge generation gap. The values between the younger and older generation are starting to clash, both in society but also in Hollywood. The old generation is fading. They aren't making movies that the younger generation want to see. So what do? They bring in young directors to try to make movies that will appeal to the youth. And so we see a real shift in Hollywood content, especially after the production code is dropped around 66 and the MPA rating system is brought in 68. The effect this has is now taboo topics, sex, violence, exploring things, showing criminals getting away with crimes in your movie. Things of this nature are now permissible, and the young directors run with it. The movies that we see coming out of the 60s and definitely into the 70s, when this movement really has time to get going, are really radical, and they're some of the most artistic and divergent films that we see made in Hollywood in its entire history. So this is a very creative period, a very tumultuous period, both in the nation and Hollywood. We're seeing young directors taking over, and they're using new technology. That's another thing that is come about through the 60s. Improvements in obviously news technology we saw last week, but in Hollywood we see better cameras, lighter portable gear so that cinematographers can operate handheld cameras. We see the introduction of the zoom lens, which allows subjects that are far away to be zoomed into and appear closer. We see all these developments being deployed in films like Bonnie and Clyde, a really seminal film that broke the mold, that was made by a studio, Warner Brothers, but they didn't really know what it was about. They just sort of threw the reins to these young people and they came up with a hit. It was radical, it was violent, and it captured the imagination of young people at the time. Another film that did that was The Graduate. It's another one of our selections for this week. A seminal film that really captures the spirit of the 60s. There's so many memorable lines from the film, and it delves into sex in a way that wasn't really permissible in previous years. And lastly, we end with the absolute classic, a masterpiece, top 10 film of all time, 2001, which really coincides with the space race. It's directed by Stanley Kubrick, and it really captured the U.S. Film-going public's imagination. It really showed off the space race and the possibilities for space exploration in a way that was not thought possible prior to that. And culminating in, of course, the space race in '69 when we land on the moon. It was a real advertisement for that, and really caught the zeitgeist of the time with incredible technology and groundbreaking filming techniques. Many of the people that worked on 2001 went to work on Star Wars just 10 years later. Okay, so that wraps up our lecture for this week. Hope you've enjoyed it. We've covered how the 60s is a really important time and a lot of changes. This has gone into more detail in the video compilation. Make sure to read your study guide, reach out with any questions, and of course, have a great week.